got Kevin Mandia this morning, kind of a big deal. Kevin is one of the foremost leaders on cybersecurity, like in the world. He the founder of Mandiant, the co-founder of Ballistic Ventures. He's an Air Force veteran, graduated with a BS from Lafayette, where he also was an ROTC student. He's also got a master's in forensic computer science.
No, just forensic science, but you're doing great. Science. You read the bio.
I read the bio this morning, and then I'm done.
It's written by marketing, so it's like 9 pages long.
I distilled it. He's also the proud father of 3 daughters, and we are going to have to finish on time today because Kevin may be catching a flight to Las Vegas to go watch the Super Bowl this afternoon.
When you have 3 daughters, the only Super Bowl I can get them interested in is the one that Taylor Swift's going to.
So we've got about an hour. We're running a little bit behind, but we'll roll over. We're going to take some time for questions towards the end. So if you have some questions, please have those lined up. We're going to cover his time with Mandiant, growing the business, selling the business, his time with Ballistic Ventures, which is one of his newer ventures. Maybe even get some thoughts on the world of cybersecurity and whatnot. But I'll start with a little bit of an icebreaker question. You've been defined as, and this was in print, a swashbuckling crime fighter, nationalistic, computer savvy, with Liam Neeson good looks. Which of those attributes makes you happiest? I think it's the Liam Neeson good looks.
So you're referring to an article in Fortune magazine?
Fortune magazine in 2013.
I don't normally take the stage and then start disrobing, by the way. It's just, I look out there and nobody's got a tie on, so I'll take it off. On all that, here's the reality, and this will sound like a farce to you. I never really read the whole article. And to this day, Nina Easton's like, there's no way you didn't read it. I haven't, because if it was bad, I would have. I would have done damage control. But I didn't hear anything bad about that article, so I didn't read it. Out of all that, I'll take the Liam Neeson.
The Liam Neeson good looks?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
I figured so much.
Swashbuckler?
Swashbuckler, crime fighter, nationalistic, computer savvy, with the Liam Neeson good looks you like.
Yeah, it was, and just as context to that article, I didn't write it. A bunch of folks that I had hired out of the military came to me one day, and my company had responded to computer security breaches since 2004. And this was 2013, so we had a 9-year run. You know, the overnight success, we had a 9-year run of responding to one threat group that hacked out of China called PLA Unit 61398. And at the time, my company was 500 employees, about 350 were veterans, and we were, hey, it's time to do something. The Chinese government is hacking Campbell's Soup, hacking, you know, our beverage companies, hacking anyone doing M&A in China. So we went public with that. What's that? Yeah, so sorry. Yeah. Got it. Back to the Donahue show. So the bottom line is the Chinese government had been hacking U.S. companies, so we kind of wrote a expose on that, put it out with the New York Times in February of 2013. And I got to tell you, there must have been nothing going on in the world for me to get the cover of Fortune magazine, but we'll do it.
Well, I did also read the entire article along with your bio. I did, yes.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I'm a swashbuckler. I don't know what that means. I'm a pocket passer in football terms, so.
Thank you. Okay, so getting down to kind of like the brass tacks of having grown a company, right? You founded what was Red Cliff Consulting back in 2004.
Right.
7 years later, so 7 years of hard work, you took a pretty big investment from JP Morgan's One Equity Partners and Kleiner Perkins, like the big boys. Can you talk about, because we've got a room full of entrepreneurs who will hopefully look like you one day, can you talk about those first 5, 6, 7 years growing the business?
Sure.
And taking on investors?
Yeah, so I was in the military from 93 to 98 after RTC, and my assignment was computer security at the Pentagon as an Air Force officer, and then I cross-trained into the Air Force Office of Special Investigations doing computer crime investigations in the military. So my whole military experience grounded me in exactly what I was going to do. When I started a company, there's probably 2 or 3 differences between my experience and most startups. One, I didn't have a discovery phase at all. I was only good at one thing, cybersecurity and responding to security breaches, and that's the company that I started. That's what we were going to do, because I thought it was unique that in cybersecurity at that time, the only companies in it were just software companies, and they had totally lost touch and had no touch with what the threat actors were really doing. It really was the perfect moment for someone coming out of the military that believed we had adversaries that said, hey, the cyber domain's gonna matter, let's respond to every breach that matters and build better technology to defend ourselves from it. So I didn't have a discovery phase, but also didn't have a funder. No one was gonna fund a guy coming out of the military saying, hey, security breaches are inevitable. Don't be a headline. That was our tagline on the website that I made. And I remember meeting with Gartner and Forrester and all the analysts, and nobody actually believed our thesis. So I'm convinced the only reason Mandiant, my company, was successful is because 99% of the world didn't believe the thesis that turned out to be right. We had no competition. We were going to respond to every breach that mattered, and there was nobody in our way to do it. But I had to start a company to respond to every breach that mattered. So the first difference with my startup and many other startups is that there was no discovery phase. We had one playbook. We were going to run that play. We were going to respond to every breach that matters, and then build an endpoint technology to defend against all the attacks, all the new and novel attacks that we saw when we responded to those breaches. Second thing, James, that was different is I didn't have funding for the first 7 years. So when you go out and you try to do your raise, you have to go out and say, you got to sell venture on the possibilities of your company. I skipped that. In hindsight, by the time I did a raise 7 years into it with Kleiner Perkins, where I met a partner named Ted Schlein, and I did a raise with One Equity Partners at JP Morgan with Rick Smith, and Jody Gessau was there. We sold on performance, and to this day, Ted goes, that was the best pitch I ever got. And I gotta be honest with you, I flew into San Francisco, I brushed my teeth with dots that you buy at a CVS, went into the meeting, gave the worst pitch I ever gave, and then we got funding. But the reason we got funding is we were 53 million in revenues at the time and 17 million in EBITDA. And we're growing at like 85% CAGR. So performance is what got me my investment, quite frankly. And it was a secondary round because we were all ex-Air Force guys and none of us owned furniture yet. So we did a secondary round so we could actually stop living off peanut butter and jelly. So that was good. So those are the two differences. But I can tell you, at least what worked for me, and everybody learns everything the hard way. All the cliches turn out to be true. But I really lived and breathed what we did, responding to breaches. I wanted to be the best in the world at that trade craft. I wanted our employees to be the best in the world at that trade craft. And we just stacked Legos, 1 week at a time. Self-funded startup, the best thing you can do, in my opinion, is do every job you do right, because one happy customer gives you your next 10 customers. 10 happy customers give you your next 100. And that was literally how we survived. That and the fact that the Chinese decided to hack the living heck out of the United States in 2004 and onwards, really, we got to ride that wave.
You kind of half joked that it was a bunch of Air Force guys, right? But when we were having a call 2 nights ago to prepare for this, you said you have a propensity for hiring veterans, and that's very important to you. So can you comment on hiring veterans?
Sure.
And then also, as you called it, the observables of the best leaders.
Well, what was amazing as a self-funded startup, and we did services to bootstrap making an endpoint company, is the network that I had was the military, and the veterans that I hired were all better than me at what we did. So it's kind of nice that I talked them into it. All of them, in hindsight, I remember they all took pay cuts to join. So, I hired a guy named Dave Merkel, another veteran from the Air Force who runs Expel. They're over 100 million in revenues right now. Great, great leader. And I remember he joined from AOL until like a 50% pay cut. And he was eager about it. And I remember walking out of the room going, why is he doing this? It's amazing to me. I got lucky on timing in that people that wanted to sprint rather than just walk were ready to join a company that was going to sprint and make a difference. So I got folks out of AOL primarily because the company was in DC. And then I hired a gentleman named Travis Reese who was at Mantech to run operations. He was phenomenal at what he did. So I got to almost just pick the best military folks coming out of the military that wanted to do cybersecurity in the private sector. Perfect timing. And I wanted to share this too because I was startled by this. And it's interesting in a Marine memorial. Hired a lot of Air Force guys, Navy, Army. Over time, having actually it's 20 years of observables now, there is something in the water with the Marines because our Marines that we hired actually percolated up the org chart faster and higher than all the other branches. So at least in the Mandiant test case, we had hired some Marines. Like one is a guy named Marshall Howman. He's running a company called DTEX right now. It's about $30 million in ARR. It's an insider threat technology. At one point in his career in 2005, Marshall, I was one of those founders that literally ranked all my employees from 1 to like 700. If somebody walked into my company at any time and said, Mandia, cut 10%, I was done. Like, okay, boom, done already. Cut 20, boom, done. Cut 2, done. Hire faster, ready. It was something about that. We always tracked everything. And Marshall was like I'm saying this publicly, he was like number 75 out of 80. Now that he's not working for me anymore, I can say that. Early in the career, he kept volunteering for every single job we had. All the Marines did that. I'd see him over in the corner of my office at 11 p.m., with a little light on, the 3 Marines like staring at stuff. And I'm like, I know they don't know what they're doing, but they're going to figure it out. And I would leave. But it's really true. So guys like Marshall, these guys became the leaders. So whatever it is, there is something in the water. My Air Force guys are always like, well, we never did that before, so we don't want to do that now. And I'm not kidding, you know. So there's something about, you know, when the Air Force trains playing ultimate Frisbee, that's probably not as intense as when the Marines train with guns. So bottom line, that was my observable. So I can tell you, when I meet a candidate to hire, it is different for me having served, and I'm in cybersecurity, and I love the mission of serving the U.S. government, and I do believe the next modern warfare is going to be fought with software, that whatever software thinks the fastest and is the most secure helps you win the war, and that matters. If all things being equal, I think the veteran's very uniquely positioned to get the roles, period. And then I even have an internal pecking order, quite frankly, for the different services. If someone's like Special Forces or SEAL, it's like, just come on board, please. We'll take you to do whatever you can do. But the Marines always had a special spot because of that can-do, will-show-up attitude. So, and it's not an easy job. We respond to breaches that matter. It's like being an emergency doctor. We get a phone call right now. 10 minutes from now, there are people literally starting to pack bags to get on a plane to go somewhere. Even in today's world, you want to be with the customer. You want to be in their office. You want to respond to their duressful situation hand in hand. And so the Marines were well suited for that.
Can you go back to talk, people have to hire people, right? You need to hire talent. Mm-hmm. And you said earlier, you convinced someone to take a 50% pay cut from a large publicly traded company to come work for you. So how did you incentivize people to join you? Was it the mission?
I think it was mission and control. Like, these were all folks with exceptional potential at a company that was only going to use 25% of it. I think that's really it. It was timing in the market, but I think folks like Dave Merkel and Travis Reese, when they joined me from the military, they wanted to be leaders. And I think they didn't want to wait to be leaders where they were at. They were like, let's go. And it's proven out with what they're doing now. They're going to continue to lead, or Marshall and those folks. And then you get the critical mass. I did find it was easier for me to hire what I would call more the indirect labor, I would call sales direct, but sales, marketing, and financial professionals after I did a round of funding. And prior to that, we were taking like regional auditors. Like, I couldn't get Ernst & Young to be my auditor when I was small. But then you do a funding with Kleiner Perkins, and suddenly Ernst & Young's ready to do it, or PwC's ready to do it. So you have to go through some growing pains. I had Cooley as my law firm, JP Morgan as an investor, Wells Fargo as my bank, oddly enough, wherever they are in the room. And that's because during 2008, Bank of America wouldn't give me a loan, so I had to do it. But going back to your question, I think it was the opportunity to be real leaders. Like, I was not a founder that was oppressive. I was like, you're better at what you do than I am. You've got this. Dave Merkel, you run the engineers. Travis Reese, you're the business leader for this company. I had a guy named Steve Serdou running consulting. Honestly, at the end of the day, there were times where I did my staff calls on Sunday nights, which in hindsight's insane to me. I was like, I'm not wasting a customer's time. We're going to talk every Sunday night at 6 p.m. after football. I would sit there and think, how did I get these guys to be here? So I'm glad they joined, and they helped me get to be able to sit in front of you to share that. But the theme is hire great, and you'll be great.
Let's talk about the flip side, not hiring people but that are working for you, but dealing with a board. And also in that Fortune article, you may have quoted yourself or described yourself as almost being incorrigible when it comes to dealing with the board. So this was actually a question that came up during one of yesterday's panels. How do you think about working with the board and approaching people to be your board members?
I didn't have a board meeting. I started my company in February of 2004. My first board meeting was like 2011. So I had a 7-year run without a board meeting. So the first time I went into a board meeting, I lasted about an hour before I slumped in my chair and turned to my right-hand man, Travis, and said, you got to start answering these questions. I'm going to lose it. I didn't say those words out loud. I said it by going like this and sitting through the meeting, because we were rocking, we were rolling. And I think Mandiant, my company, being self-funded and profitable, just was not, there wasn't a pattern recognition that venture capital, normally sees. So I think they play like a game of perfection, and I've been told that there's way more patterns between startups than I see, and that may be true. We all go through the same phases. But for me, the board meetings, we looked so different. I used to do budget process to profitability, not to maximum growth. And I think that was part of the cultural difference. When VC came in, it was like, how do you maximize your opportunity? I never thought about Mandiant as how do we maximize our opportunity, meaning how do we have the highest growth rate and shareholder return? I actually maximize it on, are we the best in the world at what we did? And I always felt that was a founder's job. Like, if the founder can't answer, are we the best in the world, then you're not. I mean, you've got to know enough about what you're doing to know when you're on top, and you're more capable than your competition. And I felt very confident, bordering really on arrogance. We were the best in the world at responding to breaches, best in the world at understanding the new and novel threats against our infrastructure. And that mattered to me way more than shareholder return. So board meetings weren't my audience, quite frankly. I wanted to sit with the CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, and say, what is your problem? How can we help solve that problem? And so that was my audience. Long-winded way of saying, we all have, when you take funding, you are now a team with your venture partner to succeed, but you may define success slightly different. But I do know the founder owns the culture, the founder owns the mission, and the founder is going to have to drive that sense of urgency into their company more than the VC. And then my observables are the founder will have to listen to a lot of unsolicited advice. But that's okay, it's just part of your education. I was bad at listening to that unsolicited advice, and I think that comment came out somewhat tongue-in-cheek because my board meetings were always scheduled for 4 hours, and I always lasted 1. I mean, that's the best way to say it. I really did. I listened. I genuinely did. I did get educated. I did learn. I liked the, see the forest from the trees perspective I got from my board members. But then I would turn around the very next day, and we're in the trenches. We're just trying to build Legos to stack a beautiful strategy over years. I didn't have an exit plan. That was probably my third difference. I did not start a company with, here's my exit plan. And I'll never forget the day, I met a large tech company, and they wanted to buy us. And I'm sitting on how these meetings can go. You're on one side of the table, and there's 8 corp dev guys on the other side, and they look at you. And the very first question this company asked me was, what's your exit plan? And that's when it hit me, exit? This is what I do. Like, I don't have an exit. And I don't think most founders in this world are going to be there. When you take funding, you do have to have an exit plan. You need to know who your possible acquirers are, or where you fit, or if you can IPO and you're in a market where you can create performance to IPO. So, James, that's my long-winded answer saying I had to acclimate to board meetings. I do know that I made the board meetings no additional prep, and I recommend that for every founder in this room. It can't be this one-off thing you do. If you have a battle rhythm of board meetings, make the reporting and the framework at which you communicate to the board helpful to you. And it literally, our board meetings did not take extra prep time at Mandiant. It was the same things that we used to manage the business. And hopefully you can get that battle rhythm quickly. Otherwise, it's just a distraction, I think.
So going back to having these investors, and asking for capital, how do you size it the right way? I mean, for the entrepreneurs in the room, like, how do you know what the right number is to ask for?
Oh, that's a hard question, actually. In fact, I've never even looked at it from that perspective. There's usually a slide in every pitch as to what the money is going to be used for. And sometimes, I mean, I almost don't I guess on every pitch, I've never actually genuinely listened to that the first time through. And I bet other VC do. I don't consider myself 100% venture capital. I am part of Ballistic Ventures. I'm a founding partner. We've done 18 investments. We've raised over $600 million now. And we do just cybersecurity, seed round and A round investments. I got to tell you, when somebody says, it's usually the last slide, and we want to raise $6 million for this, for whatever reason, the first time I glaze over that because I'm thinking about, is the founder the right founder? Is the genesis of their career leading to this moment for this company? And I actually arbitrarily just go, here's what I think the right amount is. I mean, I hate to say it, if I were them. And then I have a conversation with them genuinely like, hey, why are you asking for $6 million? And I think I would just talk it out. There is no right answer because I think as a founder, you're always balancing how much equity you want to give up and how much runway do you get for a certain number. So I think it's a complex question. And you do have, I would think most of you, if you go to get funding, you do have a pretty big zone of potential outcomes that are acceptable to you. If somebody says, hey, I'll give you $20 million now for a $400 million valuation, that may align with what you want. And someone might say, I'll give you $3 million for a $20 million valuation, but you get what you need. Very complex question. Sorry, I can't give you a definitive answer, but I can say for the part of my brain that I think is somewhat of a venture capitalist, I don't take the first numbers I see at face value. I start asking a lot of questions, and it's more not on dollars and cents, but on the game plan in the next 2 years. Like, what are you going to do in the next 2 years? What do you really need to hire? What kind of go-to-market do you need?
Okay, so kind of let's bridge from the Mandiant role to the Ballistic Ventures role.
Yeah.
You've raised one fund. You've closing on a second, or you recently closed on a second. What are you looking for? And you're kind of already answering the question. Like, how do you evaluate those who are coming to you?
Yeah, there's 5 partners that we have that evaluate every single investment opportunity, and I put myself in I go right at the founder. I mean, that's kind of my niche. I want to know. I am uncomfortable with founders with a lot of discovery ideas. I don't know why. I never went through a discovery phase, so if I've got someone saying, well, I'm thinking of this or this or this, I just go, whoa, that sounds interesting. But for me, that creates risk to me for some reason. And other folks can recognize a great entrepreneur and say, hey, that great entrepreneur can gut it out and find a product market fit and be successful. What I look for in a founder is very simple. I believe that the genesis of their career, I start straight out with, I want an hour with the founder. I just say, hey, tell me about yourself and your career. I usually go first for about 5 minutes, linear about my career, and then shut the hell up and hope they go 20 minutes because I can hear how they communicate, and I want to know that their career, the genesis of their company, their whole career backs it. Period. Like, I just love that when it's a perfect fit. When somebody says, well, I've been doing consulting for 22 years, this problem's at every company I go to, and now I'm going to build software to solve that problem, I go, here, I get that. You're an expert in that. So I think that's part of it is the founder. And then I have a few questions I ask the founder just to get a sense of their, I don't think a founder should ever have a retreat plan, you know. I don't know how else to describe it. I try to find, are they all in? Is there, you know, when you're backed into a corner, you're going to fight your way out like a cornered rat because I think every startup's going to have 2 or 3 milestones where you are up at 3 in the morning, not being able to sleep. Even when things are going good, by the way, the doom voices come in. You're like, oh man, I don't know if we're going to make it. Meanwhile, you're sweating, you know, in hindsight, something's pretty small. You need to find a founder that has an incredible amount of fortitude. And then, of course, the first-time founders are more complicated, I think, than the ones where you've seen them go through the process numerous times because they've learned everything the hard way like I did. So I would approach a first-time founder a little bit different. But again, linear thought, great communication of vision, and the genesis of their career leads to the moment and the genesis of that company. Like, the whole thing aligns.
Punchy question, but is there like a red flag or a couple red flags that would scare you away?
Yeah, there are. It's trying to think of the most politically correct way to say it. The flag is when someone has like 1,000 outside interests. You know, I hate to say it, like, you know, I think they have to be maniacally focused on what their company is going to do. And so you can ask questions, so what do you do in your spare time? And if you get a list of like 38 things, I hate to say it, after a while, I'd be like, whoa, they've got so many distractions in their life. I'm not sure they're going to stay Like if somebody asked me in 2004, hey, what do you do in your free time? I want to respond to every breach that matters. Hey, what do you do in your free time? I read computer forensic books. I want to be the best. Like literally, I'm not even kidding. I genuinely wanted it. I wanted it. And I was not a great person outside of my career path. I hate to say it. If somebody said, hey, man, do you want to like run 5 miles to save a dog's life? I'd be like, man, I got a book to read. You know, it's just, that's the way I was wired. So that's one, is somebody who's got their feet in too many pies or fingers in too many pies, you start wondering, hey, are you going to be able to stay focused on this task? It's going to take a lot of heavy lifting.
A natural extension of that may be the fact that you sit on a couple of boards, right? And time management is obviously very important. So how do you evaluate what boards you're willing to sit on? And then conversely, for those entrepreneurs, when they're thinking about forming their boards, what advice would you have for them?
So I think for the boards that I want to sit on, you have to like the founder and you have to like the mission of the company. It's that simple. And a lot of folks only look for boards to sit on if the company is going to be a sure winner. I like the ones where you like the founder and maybe they have a problem to solve. You know, I had to do a little bit of a turnaround at FireEye. By the time I became a CEO of FireEye, I was a public company CEO, where about 60% of our revenues in a public market went from 94% bookings growth to -20. In a calendar year, basically. So in a public market, we had our core IP being replicated, and we had real headwinds, and that was a challenge. And for a lot of people, they're like, you know, the board's a resume-building thing, and I just want to sit on the board of successful companies. I'm not that. I want to sit on the board where you have a genuine, I will work with this founder the whole time. We'll get in the trenches, and we'll go with them. So it's mission and the founder. If you're the founder, I would look for board members you trust, and they have a unique skill set that you need at that time, whether you need the audit committee founder, you know, or the CFO type, or maybe you're in a mission where you want a couple of evangelists for that mission. You know, every board has, the composition of your board should be based on your company's needs.
Switching gears a little bit, we had a great panel yesterday afternoon on defense tech. And the conversation sort of leached into the role that government should have. And you had said in the past, if you want to move with intent and speed, being a government employee is a tough place to be.
I said that?
It was in the article that I read, so I'm assuming.
Gosh, what is this article?
I hope so.
I want to move with intent and speed. Being a government employee is a tough place. Well, it depends on what you do.
But it talks a little bit about military bureaucracy, or speaks to military bureaucracy, or government bureaucracy. But there's also these ideas, and we were kicking around some of these ideas last night, like there's an Office of Strategic Capital, like there should be more reliance or partnership with private sector to be more innovative. What are your thoughts on the role of government in trying to be more agile?
Well, first I want to say I'm pro-government. By the way, I sit on the boards of a few government agencies, and if I said that, one of the things that I've always felt, you know, I'd spent 44 years in Washington and the East Coast and 7 years in California. And there is slightly different cultures between the coasts, you know, and somebody told me, don't make it a coast thing, don't make it geography, but there's a little bit of a difference. And I'd say both sides get it right. I think the government is more mission-based. It's not managing the profit and loss, it's managing to a mission, or it's managing to win and lose like the military. And to me, that's the most lofty mission on the planet. So I'm a huge fan of the military, huge fan of law enforcement and folks that have the most sacrifices in their career, quite frankly, to do the right things that make them feel whole and complete and with purpose. I think there's a constant, I think every nation struggles with getting government to be more nimble. I think the government is doing things like the DIU unit. You had Michael Brown here yesterday, I believe, and he had run the DIU unit. You look at what In-Q-Tel does. I think there's a lot of gestures where the government's going to move faster. I do believe we always do the right thing under duress. Like when the FBI needs to solve a case, they can. When our military needs to execute a mission, it does. So we're really, really good when the proverbial, you know, duress is there and exigent circumstances are there. So it's more like how do we manage the plateaus in between. I don't have a good answer for that, but I think you're going for the strategic funding aspect of it. I do believe that there's a lot of unique challenges that every large organization has that it does make sense, and other nations do have funds that invest in technology and funds that invest in technologies that are needed. We have In-Q-Tel already, which is very early stage, small amounts. It may make sense for the government to think, to me, innovation is faster at startups and smaller companies than very large behemoths. So either the large companies learn how to execute at speed with small groups, or the government sponsors small groups that innovate at speed. So I'm a fan of the government getting in the game to have strategic investment.
Thank you. So in a couple minutes, we'll go ahead and just open it up. So if you've got questions, please maybe start heading towards the mics. I'll fill the time with a couple of final questions, then we'll take them from the crowd. There's an election coming up.
Right.
Back in 2022, Mandiant sort of unveiled some disinformation campaigns. What are you seeing right now that you can share? Do you have concern?
Yeah, I think, obviously the next generation, sitting inside Google now, because Google bought my company, we get to see what AI is going to bring to the table. And as an investor, we've invested in incubated a company because all of us want to know if what the video, the audio, or the picture that we're looking at, is it synthesized, yes or no? And there's just no question this generation right now, we all are going to have to figure out where do we get our sources of truth. And we need almost detection technology that says, hey, this file's been altered in some way. And right now, I'm unaware of any technology that hits that at 100%. So my gut is adversaries are licking their chops for the 2024 election. You'll see amplification of probably 95% accurate information. Quite frankly, if you're an adversary of the United States or an adversary of democracy or just you want to stir the pot, whatever your motivations are, all you have to do is amplify far right and amplify far left, and you can create the fervor you want. And those amplification networks are primarily, social media. So they do exist. I remember in 2016, there was a gentleman at my company that walked in like May of 2016 and said, hey, we've got hundreds of Twitter handles amplifying hundreds of Facebook walls, and we think it's these like 4 or 5 Russian people doing it all. And we didn't know what to do with it. I mean, I called Senator Warner and said, I've got something, I don't know what to do with it, but I have 140 pages on it. And we called Twitter, we called Google at the time, we called Facebook, and all of us wanted to do something, but we didn't know what to do with all this information at that time. And you fast forward from 2016, where that was absolute artificial amplification of fake news to influence the hearts and minds of America. Fast forward to now, there's armies of people looking for this kind of stuff, but there is no perfect. So I think in 2024 during the election, I'm certain everyone in this room is getting ready for it. Wonder what we're going to see. Iran's got an offensive disinformation campaign apparatus. So does China, and so does Russia. And I think every modern nation has no idea what the rules of engagement are in the use of those tools. And I don't think they care. So we'll learn more in 2024. But as a citizen, I'd say all of us are going to have to be extra diligent as to what we trust and believe. And then the frustrating side of all this, if you see something and you know it's fake, you still can't forget it. How annoying is that? So I think we're going to just we're going to have to temper our reaction to what we see and hear till we know it's true.
Thank you. Question?
Good morning, Josh Marino from Evolution Space. We build solid rocket motors, and we're getting ready to do our first priced round. There's a lot of advice yesterday to have a board formed before you do your priced round to kind of ensure your seats and make sure that you're protected. From your aspect, is it more important to have a board focused on your industry and then filling kind of the slots that you need, or is it better to have the best skill set for what the company needs, regardless of what their kind of industry background is?
So great question, and I'll sound like a lawyer saying equal and opposite compelling arguments to it. The bottom line is whoever the founder is has to culturally align or be challenged by their board. And it can't be, a negative. It can't have a deleterious effect to the performance of the company. So first and foremost, there's got to be a chemistry that exists. I think you need both. You need somebody that has the mindset on the board that helps run a business at the performance and execution level, and then you have a service or a product and things that you're building. You need board members that have reach and gravitas in those areas as well. If I were thinking about the composition of my board, I am thinking more about who's on it than the timing of it, if that makes sense. I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's probably more helpful to get funding when you have certain board members and others, but I think you need both types of board members. That's my the shortest I can make that answer. Sorry about that.
No, perfect.
I
Thank you very
definitely
much.
I think it is great to have at least one board member that almost 90% of what he does is challenges you. I had one. And in hindsight, I regret my nonverbal communication with that person, because I'd be like, oh, he's talking again. I've matured since then. And in hindsight, he became one of my favorite board members, I'll be honest. Because the reason I reacted to him the way I did is I actually agreed with him. When he was hammering me for, you got to do better. And I was like, that part of my pride side did it. I recommend for every founder, have a board member that challenges you. I mean, literally almost all the time. And it's an irritant. There are times where you don't have the time for it, but in hindsight, it became, he doesn't know it yet. I'll wait another year or two before I call him up and say, hey, thanks for being a real pain in my, you-know-what. So.
Perfect.
All right, I can't answer it. I think it's equal and opposite compelling arguments.
Awesome. No, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hey, Kevin. Kyle Kino, CEO of MVS, a cybersecurity startup.
Yes.
Yes, sir. So appreciate you sharing insights about your investment thesis. Just wondering from a seed stage, like what other aspects, like say traction, for instance, are you like looking for with Ballistic Ventures?
If you mean traction, when I hear the word traction, I think customers you already got. Is that what you're referring to?
Correct. Or
Yeah.
I guess what level of traction would you be looking at to be considered seed? Because I feel like that term
Sometimes
seed
not.
has like changed over the past year.
Yeah, so no, we would do a seed round even with no revenues, no traction, no customers yet, if the idea is right and we want to back the founder. So because we recognize a lot of times folks have different risk profiles, folks have different backgrounds. I mean, you may need to take investment now to prove your concept and prove that you've got the contacts and the capability to deliver on your promise. Some folks don't. They're like, this is my third startup, and I'm going to fund the first year, and I'm going to go to get a seed round or an A round with $2 million in revenues, right? So I don't think I look at that. It's more the founder, their capability, their needs, their ideas, more than we're not investing based on past performance, quite frankly.
Roger that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim?
Thank you for being here this morning. Two questions. One is, can you shed some light on how operators think versus investors? Because now you sit on both sides, or you have sat on both sides. And then the second question is, you mentioned books. Any books that you find have been very helpful to not just like startup, but life, and just any books you recommend to us?
A couple things. So great question on the first one. I think the biggest difference between operators and venture, I think they're both right at the same time, and yet we'll disagree, is that everything's easy if you're not the one that has to live it every day. So venture capitalists be like, you got to get rid of your sales guy. Talk to you later. And then they jet, and you're like, okay. And you spend the next 3 days iterating all 20 different outcomes from the conversation you're about to have, whether you're even going to do it or not also. Do you take on the board or your investor saying, listen, no, I think I got the right guy. He missed the 90 days. What the hell's 90 days? It's not anything. So that's the first difference, is an operator recognizes, and sometimes when things get hard, you do start getting an unconscious bias to avoid the hard. So that's why every morning, I did this, by the way, that's why I never smile. I used to do the hardest damn things on my agenda first thing in the morning and forced it. God, it was annoying. So I hated all mornings, and I loved all afternoons. So literally, if I had a personnel problem, it was first thing on the list. If I had those hard conversations, I have first thing on the list. I didn't procrastinate them because I felt the longer I procrastinated, the bigger I felt like a wimp, and I put them down first. VC are probably right, and sometimes operators don't want to operate through hard. That's the biggest difference. That really is. VC don't have to live it every day. And the hardest part is when you're a founder and you can see with clarity the VC's got the wrong, what you think they have the wrong conclusion. Convincing them that you're doing the right thing for the company is complicated sometimes. But that's what I found. The amount of times I knew my board was right. I'm going right to the board even. Board would be like, hey, Kevin, you need to dump that product, and get 500 new customers. Okay. Now you got to go figure it out. That creates. And then there's a timing issue. I think boards always think everything can happen faster. The more you lead, the more you manage, the more you're a CEO, the more you do realize you can get faster at all these things. That's all I'll say. But that's the difference. It's easy to say, but it isn't easy to do. And that creates a divide. In regards, what was your second? Books. The books. I listen to them all. I mean, that's the reality. Whether it's strength to strength, you know, jumping the arc from your first part of your career to the second part of your career, or, you know, it's your ship. I listen to almost all of them, period. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you.
Morning, sir. Thank you so much for sharing the time with us today. Louis McCullough, former OSI Cyber. Quick question about the value of maintaining a network inside of tech if you're going into a defense-adjacent startup. Can you speak to some of the, perhaps like a war story of how that helped you as you transitioned out of the Air Force?
Yeah, what do you mean by like keeping in contact with folks that are still involved in tech, like Google, Microsoft, all that, or?
I suppose the other side, like keeping in contact with the defense side or
Yeah,
people
oh
in
God, yeah.
government.
It's first off, I think if you serve in the military, the military's in your blood for the rest of your life. I actually believe that. And you want to hire veterans, and you want to know what missions do we need to get better at, what things are putting soldiers in harm's way, and what the hell can we do to help. And in the cyber domain, we all know it's going to be, you know, it's funny, it's air, land, sea, space, and cyber. We know we have a real mission to do in the private sector to bolster the cyber domain. So I think you have to be aware. If you're in cybersecurity, you got to know folks at the NSA. You have to play team ball with governments and intel agencies, period. And you will be a part of, you know, the whole staging of the next conflict. So I think it's mandatory in cybersecurity for sure. And then I just think it's in our blood. If you're a veteran and you leave the military, you know what the military's challenges are. I think it's just intuitive. Most of us want to help, and most of us want to fix it. So it's important to stay current with who's leading the endeavors and the missions in the military that you're close to.
Brennan?
Good morning. Thank you for the conversation. I loved your philosophy around not having an exit plan and rather building a house that you wanted to live in. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what it did feel like to exit and what it felt like after the transaction closed and you kind of stepped out of that role.
Yeah, so the first time we exited was December 30th of 2013, and I was sitting 2 floors away from my office, and I got to be honest, in a way, I felt like I failed. You know, FireEye was buying us. Dave DeWalt got me very excited, and I was excited about the future. And my company was at a point where we were going to go public or get bought. We had 11 or 12 offers to buy my company, Mandiant, and along the way, by the way. And I never reflected on that at the time. I had to count them later. You know, how many LOIs were faxed to me back in the days where you got faxes? You know, it's at first, you know, even, you know, now I got bought by Google again the second time. The first one for me, I felt like I didn't make it to the bar I had set. I got to be honest, I felt like I was joining a team mid-stride, and we got a lot more work to do. There was no exit. I hate to say it. That's the best way to say it. But I felt bad for the team because I think people loved that small. We were 500 people, and they loved the energy we had, and they were worried about the newness. But we overcame that quick. But I just wanted to be honest with you. When I first saw it, it wasn't like I was running around the office high-fiving people. I was solemn, actually. Google is different. You know, we were a public company. When you're a public company, you are for sale. It's published every, I don't know, 6 times a second what the price is, right? And on that one, I'm basically just doing my job. It's if there's someone interested, and obviously the mission does work, and we can be great at security with Google technology and Google resources. So it had to fit to the mission, and it does. But at the same time frame, there was no emotion in that one. That was just, I'm a public CEO. There's an offer on the table. Hey, board, let's start a committee. What are we going to do? You know, so.
I have a second question. What kind of technology or companies are getting you really excited today?
What kind of technologies? At first, if it works, I'm excited. I mean, it's amazing. This is actually sort of true. In my whole life, I've probably only seen 3 product demos that really made me go, oh my God, that's great. And one of those companies actually didn't succeed based on their exit. But it's hard to put in a category. I can tell you, like right now, there's a company called Wiz. Great interface, beautiful, how they did the user interface for getting all the security data in one pane of glass for security. CrowdStrike did a great job on the endpoint. I look at their design and how they did it. Going to the earlier stages, I just got to tell you, I've never seen anything at the A round or C round where we invest where I just go, wow, that's great. It's just not there yet. It's not at a maturity level that does it. So I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, and there's no one category that necessarily wows me. It's the software and the experience when I look at that. So,
Thank you.
Got some other questions? Okay, then I'll ask you this. What question would you have anticipated today that you didn't receive, or any other words of wisdom that you'd impart on the VCs and the entrepreneurs in the room?
well, first, it was absolutely an honor and a privilege to be able to do this. And so I appreciate all of you that have served and all of you that are helping the folks who have served. It means a lot to have this opportunity. And for the founders in this room, there is no give up. You know, there are no, every cliche I ever heard turned out to be true, and it irritated the hell out of me. But the one thing that I think separates a great founder from founders that could have been great is the ability to continue, period, and persevere. So with that, thank you very much.